Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, a security awareness series. I'm Chris Hadnagy, and this is episode 195. Can't believe it. We are inching close to that 200. I never thought we'd get there, so I'm really excited about that. As I mentioned, I am Chris Hadnagy, CEO and founder of Social Engineer LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation, as well as the Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been hosting this podcast since way back in 2009. This is our first podcast of 2023 in this series, so it's sponsored by our company, Social Engineer. So if you are one of those companies out there, which I think is every company, dealing with the threat of social engineering, maybe you're figuring out how to combat phishing, one of the hugest attacks that we see all the time, or maybe your people are dealing with phishing emails each and every day, or you're getting those weird SMS messages trying to attack your phones, or a combination of all those things, and you're wondering how you can possibly help your people be prepared, you should run on over and check out social-engineer.com. We have a lot of services over there that can really help your people learn how to be defensive and offensive against social engineering attacks. And you might find some really unique ways that we can help defend your company from these ongoing and growing attacks here. So check out social-engineer.com. Also, if you're into training and you're looking for one of our classes, we have a OSINT class. It's a 2-day class that ends with a really awesome practical exercise. We have a SERA class that stands for Social Engineering Risk Assessment, where you actually do phishing and vishing live during the class. That's a 4-day class, or 3-day class, sorry. Then we have our Advanced Practical Social Engineering class. That's our flagship, and that one is a 4-day class. And then if you go through all of those and you qualify, you get to come to the master's level class. I won't even talk about that. But all of our schedule, well, I shouldn't say that. A lot of our schedule is up on the website right now. And for those of you who've been asking, we will be updating the website shortly with more dates throughout 2023. So check that out now. If you like to talk about social engineering, or it's a topic that you just find fascinating, you should join us in our Slack channel. We have the link down in the show notes, or you can hit up Ryan or I on Twitter or LinkedIn, and we'll be more than happy to invite you in. But we have over 1,300 people on there each and every day talking about the psychology of social engineering, phishing, vishing, pretexting. We even have a small group that gets together twice a month to do practice sessions. Quite amazing. We have a job board in there, and we've had quite a number of people who have found new employment thanks to companies posting upcoming jobs in the InfoSec space. So join us there. It's a family-friendly chat. We don't condone any type of bullying or any non-family friendly talk or any illegal material. But if you're not into any of that, come on in, join us, and have a great talk about social engineering. I'd like to also invite everyone who's listening to take a moment to go visit innocentlivesfoundation.org. The team over there, I cannot tell you how proud I am of them. If you're not familiar with that, our mission is to work very closely with law enforcement as a non-vigilante group to help stop people who are trafficking children or preying on children on the internet. So we help unmask and uncover people who try to be anonymous while they're preying on kids, and work closely with law enforcement to get them apprehended. I can't tell you how proud I am of the team over there. We're now up over 480 cases that we have handed into law enforcement in the 5.5 years that we've been around, and we just keep going. And I'm really excited for some of the new things that will be coming up here in 2023. If you want to support us by joining in the fight, you can do that and apply on the website. Or if you can't do the work, which is perfectly fine, but you want to support us through donations, we are a 501c3, which means a legitimate nonprofit. We also need your support so we can keep the fight going. So you can check that out at innocentlivesfoundation.org. And one of the big supporters of the Innocent Lives Foundation is Neil Fallon. If you don't know who he is, shame on you. Okay, that's the lead singer of the best rock and roll band on the planet, Clutch. That's the intro and outro music that you hear on this podcast if you're listening to it on iTunes, Spotify, or one of the other audio deliverers of this podcast. So you can go check them out at pro-rock.com. Now is the new year. I'm sure we'll see some new tour dates coming out. If you haven't seen them yet in this new year, you should go check them out. Download their new album. Download all their albums. And check them out on Spotify or wherever you like to listen to music. They're huge supporters of ILF. And, of course, we love them here at Social Engineer. Okay, that's all of our announcements, except for the fact that I am joined by my trusty co-host, Ryan, who I totally didn't even mention you because I got so involved in my announcements. That's terrible. Ryan, it's good to have you with me here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, just so for those new listeners that don't know my wide celebrity, I am the Chief Operating Officer at Social Engineer LLC. I'm also the lead open source intelligence trainer for SECom, having taught multiple public and private classes. And I've been in InfoSec for about 25 years now, with the last 9 or 10 in information security space. So
Yeah.
It's been a good ride.
And doing active social engineering for what, about 9 of those now?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So what are we talking about this month? Because usually we have a guest on this series. We usually bring in like some really cool CISO or somebody in the security space, but we decided this month to do something different. What are we talking about?
Yeah. So this month, I think, or this particular episode, I think we should talk about what we can foresee coming up in 2023. In our space, the social engineering space, I think we should kind of let people know the trends that we're seeing and the things that they should be looking out for defending their networks.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Like I mentioned, we always have a CISO on, and we get to learn from them about the things that they have learned and they're coming up into the field and the way they've protected their companies. But we were just looking at some of the industry-based reports, and 2022 was a rough year for cybersecurity professionals. I mean, basically every report that we read points out that social engineering is used in almost every attack that we see. And every major attack, over half of them, had social engineering aspects to it. And when we talk about, just for those who may be new to if you're listening to this for the first time, when we talk about social engineering, we focus on 4 main vectors. So it's phishing, which is email-based attacks, vishing, which stands for voice phishing. So that's the ones we get on our phone where people call in and try to, either if you're at home, making believe they're the IRS, or if you're at work trying to do like wire transfer scams. Then we have smishing, which is SMS phishing. And I don't know about you, but for me personally, I have seen a massive increase in that just for me. Like I could remember times when maybe I'd get one a month and it would be so easy to be like, oh man, I don't even know who this is. Now I'm getting ones that seem like they're customized for me, and I'm probably getting 6 to 8 a day, right? And last but not least is impersonation, which could both be in-person attacks or it can also be social media impersonation. So those are the 4 vectors that we talk about when we talk about social engineering. You've seen an increase in those 2 with your personal?
Well, I mean, just reading the reports that we've been looking at, what I find really interesting is, to us, like me and you in our company, social engineering is our day in, day out livelihood. But all of these reports seem to be making the case that social engineering is the new hotness, and it's been around forever, but it just seems to be coming to the forefront where news outlets that would never talk about cyber attacks are now talking about what is social engineering, and they're kind of taking that on. So I think the vectors that we talk about are becoming so prolific at this point that people not involved in our industry are actually starting to talk about it, which is pretty eye-opening to me that it's taken this long, for one thing, because we've been doing this for so long. But now at least the rest of the world is starting to recognize that social engineering is the forefront of most attacks, and that the technical aspects of it, while they do exist, are usually at least assisted, if not started with, some type of social engineering attack.
And I think that's really a good thing when we focus on it. Sometimes, even though it took them a long time, knowledge is power in these cases. And it's really important that the media covers these things, because I've talked to people before, and you've done it too, giving speeches where you say one of these terms, like you say smishing, and people go, what? Like, what is that?
Yeah.
And now that's becoming less common, where people have never heard of it. It's becoming more common that they have heard these terms. And that's because they're in the news, they're in the media, we hear them, they're being talked about. And I think that's important, because so many times we talk with maybe older folks who are oftentimes preyed on with some of these type of attacks. And if they've never heard of them, how can they possibly defend against these things? So
yeah, well,
I find that to be important.
The vishing aspect of it, where it's hit so many major breaches last year that started off with a vishing attack, that now people are starting to recognize that word and what that actually means. And just random news outlets that never talk about cybersecurity are asking the questions of what exactly is vishing.
Yeah.
And with our clients, we deal with vishing all day long. And I think that we at least can communicate to them what vishing is and what that vulnerability is. But I think the idea of opening that up to show that vulnerability to people who don't understand the concept of it, I think is really important.
Yeah. So let me talk about something that happened this in 2022 that was really eye-opening for me. So when we work with certain companies, I set up Google alerts sometimes, just so if anything happens in the news, I can be aware of it fast. And we've been able to save a lot of clients sometimes from some either embarrassment or something big, because we are actively involved. And we do this type of threat analysis all the time for our clients. Well, we had one that popped up where on a forum, there was a group asking specifically to hire malicious social engineers, and they were paying a ridiculous amount of money for every account that got breached. And it was, on one of these dark forums where you can sign up anonymously, and they were looking for people to do this. And it was an active post, and there was a lot of people commenting on it, and you could see all the views and things like that. That got me thinking, is this something that happens often? And we started to look into it, and we found that hacking as a service was actually something that has been prolific on the dark web and increased in 2022. With what we're seeing now, 2023, it looks like this is going to be a big thing, where there are multiple websites that have popped up where hackers are now offering their services to anybody. It could be nation states, it could be hacktivist groups, it could be anyone with enough money, and they will perform these horrific services on companies or nations for a price. And they're using ransomware, phishing, vishing, every potential vector known to man. But we're seeing it now as an actual, they're calling it hacking as a service, which is crazy. We're seeing
all those different vectors are coming out. Like the ransomware as a service, I think, was one of the first things that came out that everybody was aware of. But now there's phishing as a service, and just general like hacker for hire stuff is just, it's amazing that the criminal underground is basically its own economy and its own kind of infrastructure of jobs, where they have, like, we've seen a couple of the leaks that came out of the ransomware companies, or I want to say companies, organizations, that where they have HR departments and they have training and they have recruiting services, and they're basically just companies that do a particular service. The service just happens to be illegal in most of the world.
Yeah. What I found interesting is that one that I think you and I found that we were talking about in the dark web, one of their ads actually said 24/7 English speaking support. I was like, I can't get 24/7 support from like my cell phone company. But here is phishing as a service, an illegal company on the dark web that was offering 24/7 support with guaranteed hit ratio or your money back. I was like, this is some of the best like marketing I've seen, and it was almost like I didn't want to like it so much because they were selling horrible illegal services, but here it was, and it was really done well. I was shocked actually what we saw there.
Yeah, a lot of these, what makes it as a service is they do have customer support. They have technical support. They have campaign assistance. So you can have zero technical knowledge and start running these campaigns and getting some type of money out of it. And they make their money just on a percentage of whatever you happen to get. So it's amazing to me that they're opening that up to people who maybe just hold a grudge. And all of a sudden they're just like, well, I want to attack this company because they did something wrong to me at some point in time. And now they can just go on the dark web and hire these people to go ruin that company, and they have no technical knowledge of it.
Yeah. When we talk about this, sometimes some of the questions that come in are like, why? Why do we see this? And, one of the things that I think is not, it's not foreign to any of us that are listening to this is the world scene. There's a lot of economic pressure today. Economic pressure for all sorts of reasons. The world economy is in turmoil in many places. Even in affluent countries like where we are here, there's many who are facing losing their jobs, and the increase in some areas for mortgages and rent, housing costs, food costs have made it really hard for people to live. This is real problems, right? This is not just like whining about first world problems here. This is happening in countries around the globe. Both first, second, and third world countries are dealing with this economic crisis. Whenever we see an economic crisis, we see cybercrime going through the roof. And if you think about why, the cost of entry is low. I mean, what does it cost to send 1 million phishing emails? Next to nothing, right?
Yeah.
We do thousands of phishing calls a month for our clients, all legal, right? But we do thousands a month, and we spend a few $100s on our legal service. So imagine now a whole organization, like you said, in a foreign country, a third world country, they could set these servers up for pennies on the dollar. Then they pay labor rates of next to nothing for people to come in and sit on the phone. And if their success ratio is, let's say, low, like let's say their success ratio is not as high as ours, right? Their success ratio is 10%, right? Ours is like 60 or 70%. Let's say theirs is 10%, but they're making 1,000 calls a month. They're getting 100 successes. And when their successes could be millions of dollars, I think the one report from Proofpoint said that the average breach could be $5.4 million. You look at that, that's like mind-blowing amounts of money for what they spent. Yeah. So I think it's important to realize the reason that we're seeing an increase is how low it costs to get in and how much you can make at it, which makes it, sadly, a really attractive proposition for people who are struggling to just make ends meet.
But even on the other side of the coin of that, with the whole world being under these financial pressures, that's going to have a lot of emotional ties to it.
Yeah.
So these attackers may be spending very little money executing their attacks, but their victims are going to be more victimized because they might be trying to elicit something via greed or via some type of bonus of some sort that the people are really into that they really badly need. And so they'll be more likely to fall for these attacks. So the low bar to get into it is only one side of it. The other side of it is these pressures put pressures on the potential targets and victims that make them more vulnerable.
That's actually a really good point, because in our practice here at Social Engineer, we ban our company from using pretexts that play on those core emotions that could make someone feel violated, right? So we don't use bonuses because we know that people may be under financial pressure, and that can cause someone to self-harm or, be depressed or something terrible. So we don't use those, and we don't use threats of being fired. We don't use things like, your children have been kidnapped. We don't use charities that may have just had a horrific accident, like when the planes hit the towers all those years ago. We would refuse to use those right away because we didn't want someone who maybe lost a family member to have to relive that just for security awareness. But the bad guys don't have any of those stipulations. They don't care about your emotions or feelings. So they'll use anything. That's a really good point, because I think that kind of steps up, when we get to the end, we'll talk about things that we need to do, but that steps up the real need for companies to focus on how to educate their people properly, because they will use things that will harm them psychologically.
Yeah. And the argument that, we should be testing them with that level of, just maliciousness just because the attackers do it I don't necessarily buy into that. I think we can prove our points and make people secure without going to that level. But there are companies out there that may do that. And then definitely the attackers will absolutely do that. Yeah. And that's having that level of security, building up that tolerance to those type of attacks is really, really important for companies to keep themselves safe.
Yeah. And I think that's another important point maybe for those who are listening to this and saying, I need my company to have some of this training. So yes, Ryan's right. The bad guys will use this, but there are also corporate companies, legit legal companies that will utilize pretexts like that. I mean, just last year, there was multiple news reports of large companies. There was a big utility in the UK, GoDaddy themselves did it, where they used some horrific pretext like bonuses after telling people there was no money for bonuses to phish them for their education. There was one company that used that and then after people failed, made them physically drive to a location for training when they were already broke and had no money for travel. So there are legitimate companies that will use these things. And I think it's important for you, if you're listening to this and saying, well, how do I do this education? That you actually think of that when you partner with someone. Would they be willing to go that far and use pretexts like this that may harm your people? You probably don't want to go that route, I would say.
Well, you also want to think about why you don't want to go that route. I mean, the whole point of security awareness training is to teach people something. So if you suddenly put them in a position where they are either mad at the security awareness team for doing something like that, or they're angry at the company for even providing that type of education where it's not really education, you're losing what we call the teachable moment. And so that's why we stay away from those types of pretexts, is because you want to leave people in a position where you can actually teach them something. And so when you go that route, the malicious actors are not trying to teach you anything. All they're trying to do is take your money or take your credentials or something. So they're not trying to leave you in any way. If they leave you unhappy and depressed, that's not their problem. But when it comes to security awareness, you have to think through that whole process and get to the end where you can finally say, okay, you did click on that, but how do we make you better? How can you learn from this? And have them still be on your side and say, yes, I do want to learn.
And I think sometimes when we talk about this, I have a number of people who will argue with us about this. So if you still or disagree, let me just give you this one thought that may help you see why we are so adamant about this. If you have kids and your child did something bad, something, not horrifically terrible, but they broke one of the house rules, would your form of discipline be pulling them out in front of their friends, humiliating them, maybe embarrassing them in front of all their peers, telling them how stupid they were and that they deserve the punishment they get in any consequences? I can guarantee you, if you're a good parent, you would never do that to your kid, because we love our children. And we know that humiliating them or embarrassing them or shaming them isn't going to make them want to listen to us and be obedient. It's going to do the very opposite. And any of us who may have flipped off the handle at one point on our kids, we usually feel really bad about it. Afterwards, we feel like a big jerk. And a good parent would go back and say, hey, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have reacted that way. So if you won't do that to your kids, who it's your job to raise them and help discipline them and bring them up, then we should never do that kind of stuff to employees, fellow employees who may have fallen for an attack like that, because it's just not going to make them want to be part of the company. And it makes them threats for us too if we humiliate them enough. But let's talk about another potential big problem that we're going to see in 2023, and that's ransomware. I think it was the State of the Fish report from 2022 reported that 2/3 of organizations experienced at least one infection in the past year. That number blows my mind. Yeah. Like the fact that we're seeing ransomware and that there were 77% of the attacks used double extortion techniques. So they weren't just fine with one, but they were extorting them twice and then using heavy encryption for their files. And a lot of companies, from what we're reading, ended up paying the ransom because it was like, hey, we could try to get this all back. We could try to bring this all. But what do we do if it takes 10 days, 15 days, 30 days, 60 days? So they're like, if I pay the ransom tomorrow, I can have my files back in the next 24 hours. And that made ransomware a huge growing business because they were realizing, look, infect them, encrypt, get paid, go away. It's a scary proposition to think about how much growth that means for 2023 and probably what we're going to see with ransomware.
Well, not only that, but this concept of this double extortion technique where they encrypt your files locally on your file system so then you can't access them. But before they do that, they've exfiltrated them. So they have their own plain text copies of your data. So they ask you to decrypt your files. And then if you don't do that, well, we're just going to sell your data on the internet. And they can do both. Nothing is actually stopping them from never giving you your key after you pay and also selling your data. So they're kind of trying to get paid out in every direction they possibly can to get the most out of their efforts. And from a company that's a victim of that, so even if you do pay the ransom, your data still might be sold out on the dark web somewhere. Yeah. And so there's really no way to prevent that from happening. I mean, all you can do is put together the training to prevent the ransomware from actually hitting your system from the very beginning. That's really the only defense you have, because once you're hit, the attackers hold all the cards.
So I was reading this one report that said in just the first half of 2022, so just the first half, there were 236.1 million ransomware attacks globally. I was like, what? Yikes. 236 million in just the first 6 months of 2022. When you see the amount of money that is in ransomware globally, we're going to see an increase in it. And I'm not trying to be a doomsdayer, but there is just too much, for us as a business, if we see, hey, this service is going really well, then we do more of it, right? That's the nature of business. And that's what we're going to see, is that because the 236 million in just the first half, and a lot of those paid out. It's unbelievable to think of that kind of growth.
It must be a terrible position to be in for these victimized companies where their data is gone and they need to run their business, and all they're being asked to do is pay this fine effectively to people who've stolen their data. And they're put in this position of, do we give them the money and let them know that their business is working? Because that's what you're ultimately doing when you pay them, is you're saying your business works. Or do we somehow recover without their assistance? But then it's going to take how much money on top of that to come back? And I think that's the risk reward they're trying to take, is it's going to cost us more money to come back without paying them. So we might as well take the risk of paying them and see if we get our data back. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So it's a really tough position to be in.
It really is. It's scary. And then listen, before we get to the tips and tricks, here's the last one that I want to bring up, because I think, we can go on for hours, right? But But this one we just saw as a huge reason for breaches in 2022, and that's MFA fatigue. So multi-factor authentication, right? Okay. All of us, any security expert, has been pushing MFA forever, right? And I still will push it. You need to have it. I mean, just think about the most recent LastPass breach Now we're hearing people say, get rid of all password managers. That is not the answer, right? That is not. You need a password manager. Maybe not LastPass, right? But you need a password manager. But MFA could still save you, right? So if your vaults were compromised and they have those passwords now, if you have MFA turned on, then you'll be getting the notice saying, hey, someone's trying to get into your account. And that can help you, go change that password quickly, save that account. If you don't have MFA on, you're 100 times more vulnerable, right? But now look at what happened, and just I think it was the Cisco breach, right? And we see these in these reports where they use that MFA messages coming in by the dozens or the hundreds at one time, to where your phone is blowing up, and you grab it and you're like, oh no, and you start hitting deny, and by chance somebody's finger slips, or because they get so frustrated they just hit accept. And now that person's in, right? Yep. And that's what happened. And one of these breaches. And that is scary, because now we're thinking, well, what are we doing? Like, I know we use different tools. I won't say the names here, right? We use many of them. And
thank you.
And every time I go to log into one of our services, ding. And all of a sudden, if I was sitting here one day in a meeting and it was ding, 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 you would, come on, stop,
Yeah.
And then you have a legitimate request. Like, now I need to log into the service. Well, which one is the legitimate request, and which one isn't?
Yeah.
How now we're asking employees to figure all that out and don't do the wrong thing, right?
Yeah. It's a tough position to be in, because we keep pushing, like you said, we keep pushing for people to use this stuff and use these multi-factor authentication techniques, and then now all of a sudden it's being used against them. Yeah. And it's hard for an employee to differentiate that. And, the part of the security awareness training, when you start to introduce this into your company, or if you've already rolled it out, letting people know that this MFA fatigue actually exists, that if you start getting repeated messages and you're not doing anything, that's a signal that there's a problem. Yeah. And you need to tell somebody else about that, and not just hit accept because you're frustrated, because that's basically condoning the attack at that point. Whether you think that's the case or not, you're allowing that person in.
So let's talk about that, right? Because, as we're coming up on time here, but let's talk about it, because, we just basically laid out a bunch of really depressing things for 2023, yes. Right? And it sounds like we're saying,
Happy New Year.
Right, yeah, crawl into your bunker and don't come out for a few years, right? And that's not the message, right? Because there is hope. There are things that we can do. So let's talk about the blend first between the security tools and security awareness, right? I know a lot of companies that focus on security awareness kind of frown on the tools, but here at Social Engineer, we believe that you need both, right? You need your antivirus. Everyone should have your antivirus. It's not going to save you from an O-Day. It's not going to save you from a customized virus, right? It may not save you from every piece of ransomware, but it will save you from, let's say, 99% of the garbage floating out on the internet. So you need your antivirus, you need your packet inspection systems, you need your email filters, you need all of those things that are super important, kind of like, just taking care of your health, like taking your vitamins, eating right, getting enough sleep. That's the baseline, right? You need that. Now, the security awareness piece, this is probably the next level, because it's more than just saying, hey, here's some money, send me some template fish, or here's some money, here's a video you all have to watch at the end of the year. Ryan and I are going to encourage you all to really think deeply about what security awareness means. And again, I'm going to come back to using your kids as an analogy. Mm-hmm. I know for me, when I want to talk to my kids about dangers, right? So as they grew up, when my daughter was little and she's going to have her first device and now she's going to be on the internet, at that age appropriate, I sit and I talk to her about the dangers and what to do if someone contacts her, and what to do if this happens, and what to do if that happens. I didn't merely show her a video once a year and go, okay, you're secure. I talked to her about it all the time, right? And not to scare her. I wasn't like, there are terrible people on the internet that want to kill you and murder you. It wasn't like that, right? I wasn't trying to make her faint out of fear. I was appropriately at her age trying to instruct her at some of the dangers that exist on the internet. But then I was giving her things that she can do. So, hey, if this happens, you come right and you tell me. If this happens, you're not bad. You didn't mess up. You're good. I want to help. I want to help you. I'm your advocate. So you come to me. Now, take that out of the family and bring that to your business. How can your security awareness program be more like that? Now, I can't answer that for every company listening because, we're not sitting in front of you, but if you call us, we may be able to help you. But just saying that if you sit and you think about your people, your population, how diverse are you? How spread out are you? What part of the world or country are you in? How do you communicate with your people? How big is your organization? But then think about that analogy. How can you make it so you're their advocate, not their adversary, and that they want to come to you? They want to listen to this. We push for things like make security awareness personal. Make it so it's just not about, like when we do it here, it's not just about social engineer. I want my people to feel they can take this home to their families, their husbands, wives, partners, kids, mom, dad, aunt, uncle. Take this information and give it away to your friends and family because it's going to make you a more secure person in your life. Think about how you can do that with security awareness blended with your security tools, and that gives you a much more holistic picture for security awareness. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that portion, Ryan.
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of piggybacking on what you said, the technologies are out there and they're getting better and better with machine learning and AI to help with, attack detection and anomaly detection. And all those things are amazing and great. And you should definitely employ those if you can within your networks because they will help, but they're not silver bullets. They won't take care of everything. And so as part of your security awareness training, that's the part that's going to pick up the slack where the technology fails, because ultimately attacks will get through those technologies in one way or another. They might not send through a fresh executable that might not make it all the way through, but an email that might come through to start rapport building with somebody and get them to talk back to the attacker and build up a external pathway to get the malicious stuff into you. So the security awareness is really important to tell your people, yes, we have these technologies in place, but you can't rely on them 100%. They will help you, but you cannot just depend on them 100%. You have to still be aware of how to recognize attacks. You have to know how to deal with those attacks, how to report those attacks to your security team so they know that you're under active attack. Like all of these things come together and it builds an ecosystem of a secure culture that you need all of that. You can't just put one thing in place and feel secure. So your security awareness training with your people has to dig into that by saying, if this message does get through to you, this is how you deal with it.
And I really like that. And it's not just for large companies. Like we're a small company here at Social Engineering. We're 20 or so people, but yet we have a phishing reporting mechanism. So if any of us, and even in a small company, gets an email, we report that phish. So it goes to the appropriate people. And if it is an active attack, then that person tells the whole company, like that just happened today to us. And we all get a warning. Hey, this is coming out and this is a phish. So don't click on it, right? And you would think, well, wouldn't you all know that? And we can think that way, but we don't ever assume that, right? We don't ever assume, well, everyone does this here for a living, so they should be up on it. We still want to treat everybody with that dignified respect, which is we're going to still give you a warning. And it's not because we think you're dumb. It's because that's our job. We want to be your advocates, not your adversaries. So instead of yelling at you once you click it, we're going to pre-warn you ahead of time so you don't fall for it. And we've instituted those things even in the last couple of years, keep improving our programs here. So I don't think that this is just if you're one of those Fortune 500s or Fortune 10s or whatever. Even if you're a small company, you can implement certain things that can help you stay secure and keep people aware in your company. I said it before, but I'll say it again. I really believe you need to have a password manager. They're essential because I have probably thousands of passwords that I have to remember between my work life, my personal life, ILF, all these different things that I have to be a part of. I have passwords, and if I don't have a place to store them, it's gonna be the same password for everywhere, right? And that's because I can't remember, and that's terrible. That's a terrible solution.
Yes.
But what else do people do? You either come up with a pattern that's easy to guess, or you reuse the same password. And a report that I read recently said that over 68% of the people that were asked in a survey admit to reusing passwords. Now let's think about that. You may go, yeah, but my bank never gets hacked. That's true, right? But let's say you're a Yahoo user. 1 billion accounts were hacked in the last couple of years in Yahoo, right? LastPass, another example, right? I mean, think about the amount of passwords that have been dumped on the internet in the last year. Now, if you reuse your password and you have that same password at your bank, yes, maybe your bank will not be hacked. But if that password's the same, when that breach gets dumped on the internet, what do you think a good hacker is going to do first? Try it at every bank that you may use. and go in with your email and that password and see if they can gain access. Cannot tell you how many breaches occur because of that. Now, this is not advocating reusing passwords, but this also brings up that you have to have multi-factor authentication on everything that allows it. Because between a password manager and MFA, you can at least not be the lowest hanging fruit, right?
Yes.
And just like Ryan just said, it still isn't 100%, right? There's still a chance that something can get through. So when we say that, sometimes people go, then why do it? Well, it's because if you were, again, I hate to use an analogy, if you were walking out to a battlefield, right? Would you want to have no protection? Would you walk out with nothing, no armor, no vest, nothing? No, you would say, let me be as protected as possible. Could you still get hurt? Yes, but you would want to wear the helmet, the Kevlar, everything possible to save yourself from any stray bullets. So you're going into a battlefield. That's the internet today. Every employee in your company is going to a battlefield. Give them all the protection necessary. Give them password managers. Give them multi-factor authentication. Give them great security awareness that makes you an advocate for them, not an adversary. Give them those tools, and you could see. We'll never promote you will be hacker proof, because that is the silliest thing any company can say. But you may not be the low hanging fruit. And one thing that we find about
for the attackers.
That's it. Yeah. That's what we find with the attackers, is that if you make it hard for them, they tend to give up and move on because there's so many low hanging fruits out there. They might as well just go to the easier ones where they can make their money fast instead of working hard for it. Yeah. I don't know if I have any other tips besides those. What about you, Ryan?
Well, I think kind of just looping back to one last point about the security awareness is when you were saying make it personal, I want to kind of expand on that just slightly as we kind of finish up here. Is security awareness is different for every employee in the company. No piece of security awareness is going to be the same for everyone. And so the best way to do it is to spend a little bit of extra time and make even departmental specific security awareness. So the accounting department has different vulnerabilities and threats than the real estate part of your company, or even just the operations side. They all have different threats against them. And so giving one standard security awareness to everyone in the company, some people it's not going to apply to, so they're not going to pay attention to it. So if I can just advocate anything to improve your security awareness, it would be to kind of make it specific to the people and their threats. And that means you might have to have conversations with them to figure out what they fear, and then build your security awareness to protect them against their fears. And then your security culture will kind of grow naturally, and everyone will want to be a part of it because they'll feel it personally and they'll want to take ownership of it.
Yeah, that's a really nice point. Just try to be really thoughtful this year, realizing that many people are under tremendous stress everywhere, right? Economic stress, housing stress, the cost of living has gone up. And I know most companies couldn't afford to give raises that equal the cost of living. So that can make it difficult for people who were already struggling. And now we see inflation 7-8% more in this country, at least in the US. And that can make it real difficult for people. That economic stress can really add a large burden upon families that are dealing with enough at home already. We're still dealing with mass pandemic sickness, right? COVID hasn't gone away. And now we have this new RSV thing and other types of things that come and go, especially now in the winter time when it's colder in most of the world. So a lot of people are under a lot of different pressures. So let's not add to it by making security a thing that just adds one layer to their life to make more pressure. We can use our tools and the way that we think as a community about security to better people's lives and to make them a little safer, and maybe to even take some of that pressure off. Granted, good security is more work. That is just the case, right? I mean, it's much easier for me to reuse a password and just log into my account than it is to have to go to my password manager, grab the latest password, do that, then go to my app to click the button for MFA. That takes more time. But when it becomes a process, I know now when I'm going to log into this service, I'm going to grab this password, I'm going to have to hit this button. It becomes a process. That process maybe adds 2 seconds to my life. At first, was it annoying? Sure. But now, bam, 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 I'm done, and I don't even think about it. So create those processes for your people. Help them to see security as something that can make their lives a little bit better. And, continue to listen to podcasts like this and others. There's many great pieces of information out there that can help you stay up and aware on the latest attacks. Of course, I'll promote this if you want to look at the Social Engineer newsletter. We talk about things like this each and every month, plus our blogs on both social-engineer.org and social-engineer.com, which will keep you up on not only the latest attacks, but some of the things that you can be aware of in different industries when we're dealing with social engineering and human-based attacks throughout 2023. But, we'll hopefully get to see you at some conferences this year, or you can reach out to us on our Slack channel, Twitter, LinkedIn. A lot of times these podcasts comes from themes where people come into the Slack channel and they say, hey, we'd love to hear you talk about this. So continue those messages coming in to Ryan and I. We really appreciate all the positive feedback. And thank you for joining us this month on this episode of the Security Awareness Series for the Social Engineer Podcast. We'll see you next month with a new guest. See ya.